fight fans, welcome back to Puncher's Chance, episode 9. I'm Anthony Balester, always joined by Brett Cagle. We have a lot to break down, Brett. UFC 305 was definitely a great card to watch. A lot of stuff happened. We also got a lot of stuff to talk about this weekend. But first, before we get into it, definitely make sure, all you fans out there, make sure to follow Puncher's Chance podcast on all social medias at Punch ETB. Also, make sure to follow the Empty the Bench podcast network on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at ETB Network. Also, make sure to follow our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ETB Network for all of our shows and all of our other ETB Network shows. If you can't watch Puncher's Chance, then take us on the road and listen to us wherever you can.
Puncher's Chance is presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together, with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching the commentators and communities you care about, win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB network to find out more, including our live stream schedule.
So, of course, Brett, we got to start off with the title match. I had this almost right on the nose. I did say it was going to be by decision, but I was all over Dricus Du Plessis from the beginning. So we did have Dricus Du Plessis, who was able to get the submission win over Israel Adesanya to retain the middleweight championship of the world. Honestly, Brett, this was a great fight. Win or lose for either party. This was a tremendous fight. I thought Adesanya looked pretty impressive. I thought he looked a lot better than he did against Sean Strickland. And I thought he looked better than how he looked in probably both, Alex Pereira fights, even though he did win one of those. He was, getting strikes. He was hurting Dricus. Obviously, the first 2 rounds, I gave it to Dricus. But I thought in that 3rd and 4th round, I thought Adesanya was really putting it on him. He was definitely starting to take the momentum of the fight. And it seems like when he had, everything, going his way, Dricus hurt him with that shot, clipped him a little bit. And, that led to the takedown, which ultimately led to that submission. It goes to show you, Brett, how tough, Dricus Du Plessis really is. He has a really unique and, somewhat of a sloppy fighting style. He kind of fights like a bar fight. He gets hit a lot. He leaves himself open to hits. But somehow, he powers through it and it ends up hurting you a lot more than you hurt him. It's almost like, you could hit him, but he's going to take it and hit you harder. With him being so strong, Brett, it makes him such a good grappler and give him such great takedown defense. So I was super, super impressed with him. But in defeat, I was impressed with Izzy. But what were your thoughts and reactions to this fight, Brett?
Man, I thought this was a great fight. I thought it was a great card altogether. We had performances up and down the line in the main card to talk about close fights, competitive. For Dricus Du Plessis, I think he's one of the most durable fighters we've seen in the UFC. His ability to take shots, he took over 150 punches from Sean Strickland, went to war with Robert Whittaker, and now defeated Israel Adesanya. So his durability definitely has to be it can't be questioned. But for Adesanya, I think that defensively he's on the decline. Now, offensively, like you were saying, he looked great, and he looked better offensively than he did versus Sean Strickland. But since he lost his title originally to Alex Pereira, he's now been touched up by Strickland and Du Plessis. And neither one of those guys have the technical kickboxing ability of Alex Pereira or the guys he fought, in his professional kickboxing days. So, I'm a little concerned for Izzy. He's getting older. He's getting hit a lot more in these fights. People are putting hands on him. He's now been submitted and walked down for 5 rounds in his last 2 fights. I don't really know where Izzy can go from here. But for Dricus Du Plessis, we have an unquestioned champion in this division right now. I can't wait for the rematch with Sean Strickland. I think that's going to be another highly competitive matchup that probably goes 5 rounds. But Du Plessis' ability in these title fights to, secure takedowns and, do great things on the ground has really won him the Strickland fight and now this fight with Adesanya. And like you were saying, Adesanya was taking over in those 3rd and 4th rounds. Me and you were texting mid-fight, and we both had Dricus in the first 2. But it definitely was looking like the tide was turning. And Dricus looked like he was tiring. Even, Joe Rogan, I watched back his fight campaign, and they were saying, oh, Dricus is tiring. And then, out of nowhere, Adesanya gets hit with 2 left hooks back to back and then taken down and choked out. So, I think defensive lapses from Adesanya that we've not seen in the past. Like when you go back to when he beat Robert Whittaker or Paulo Costa or Derek Brunson or any of these great performances, he was not getting hit like this. Marvin Vettori and Jared Cannonier were not able to put any type of leather really significantly on Izzy over 5 rounds. And he's just getting touched more to me, Anthony. That's my biggest takeaway. A great defensive fighter is maybe losing a little bit of that athleticism and mobility in age. And I think he's getting touched up a little bit more than he's used to.
Yeah, it's definitely a great point, Brett. And that's 100% right. But wouldn't you also say on the flip side, too, that the last couple opponents that Israel Adesanya has faced are probably the toughest opponents he's ever faced? I mean, Alex Pereira, Sean Strickland, and Dricus may be the 3 toughest opponents that Izzy has ever faced. Those guys are definitely, I think, in a step above a Marvin Vettori or a Paulo Costa or a Jaron Cannonier, as great as those guys may be. But, like you said, Brad, it seems like each fight is getting touched up more and more. And he's a guy who's been very, very active up until recently where he took the layoff. But he's had a lot of fights and a lot of wars. He also has a lot of wear and tear coming into the UFC with all the boxing and the kickboxing matches he did do. But, it's definitely going to be interesting to see where Izzy goes from here. Like he said, he's definitely not going to be tired. He's definitely got a few fights in him. He's definitely a high marketable guy. You could definitely still sell him as a co-main event in a big pay-per-view, maybe even in a main event if there's no title bout. But, honestly, Brett, when we talk about for what's the direction for both these guys, obviously, we know, like you said, Dricus is going to fight Strickland. I'm even more convinced now, even though I did have, Dricus winning that first one, 3 rounds to 2. I'm even more, convinced now that Dricus will probably win that rematch, maybe even more decisively. They always say the rule of thumb is when you become a champion, you get 10% better because of the confidence and everything that comes with it. So I think he'll actually beat probably Sean Strickland even more decisively. There's probably only one middleweight, Brett, that I could even think that could even challenge him at this point, and that's Khamzat Chimaev. Obviously, he's going to have to get past Robert Whittaker, but I do think he will get past Whittaker as great as he is. And I do think that will set up for a year from now, late 2025, after, Dricus beat Strickland, we're finally going to get Khamzat Chimaev in a title bout. And against him and Dricus, as strong and as big as Dricus is, that's a tremendous fight, Brett. And that might be the one guy that can beat, Dricus. But what are your thoughts about that, Brett? And, do you think anybody in that division could challenge Dricus right now?
I like a lot about what you just said. I think that the top of the division, Dricus has ran through, right? So he's submitted Izzy. He's knocked out Robert Whittaker, and he's beaten Sean Strickland. But he's going to fight Strickland again. So 3 of the top 5, he's already dealt with. Now, further down the middleweight division, we've talked about it a little bit on previous episodes. We really like the up-and-coming prospects that are right outside the top 15 to top 10 rankings. We like Joe Pyfer. We like Michelle Pereira, Bo Nickel, all these guys coming up, Shara Magomedov, all of them. So there are 4 to 5 guys that I think have legitimate talent right outside the top 15 that are just a little too soon to be pushed up. Now, Pfeiffer is one who they did try to push in that fight with Jack Hermanson. He's kind of on his second wave towards title contention here. I don't know, he's someone who's like 2-3 fights away, but for the short term, Dricus is going to have to fight Sean Strickland. But I like the prospects right outside the top 15, which I believe will break into the top 10 before next summer. But I don't really like where these guys are from 5 to 10 and the people that he's already beaten. I don't want to see Dricus fight Cannonier. I don't want to see him fight Vettori. I don't want to see him really fight Brendan Allen or any of those guys. Brendan Allen's an interesting prospect. We'll have to see. He's been on quite the win streak. But, I like what you're saying. I don't really think there's a clear contender for him outside of Strickland right now. But there is a bunch of young and potential fighters that I'm really interested in the division for future contenders.
Yeah, Brandon, my final question for you is, if all that does go the way, I said it could, do you think Khamzat would give, Dricus the toughest matchup right now? How would you see that one going if that was a potential matchup down the road?
So I don't think you can discount Robert Whittaker because Ikram Aliskerov has a very similar style to Khamzat Chimaev. Now, is Khamzat Chimaev better at that style than Aliskerov? Yes, he even knocked out Aliskerov on the regional scene. But the style is similar nonetheless. If he doesn't get the takedown against Robert Whittaker, we could see a similar thing happen to him that we saw with Aliskerov. And people don't really remember, but that third round against Kamaru Usman was landing some solid shots on Chimaev in that fight. Now, me and you are the biggest Khamzat Chimaev fans you'll find on the internet, but we got to look at this realistically. He's facing a former world champion in Robert Whittaker, who just knocked out a guy very, very young, very similar to Khamzat Chimaev and Aliskerov. If he doesn't get the fight to the ground, he's going to be in big trouble. I think that is as close to a pick'em fight as you can get. If he can get past Robert Whittaker, I think Dricus Du Plessis is another animal, because the strength of Du Plessis, he's not going to be one of these guys that's going to be easily controlled on the ground. And he's got 10 submission wins of his own now on his record after this last weekend. So I think Dricus Du Plessis is kind of a matchup nightmare for a lot of guys in the division.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of stuff you said, Brett. And, Robert Whittaker is not a guy that you could just, gloss over. And, what's going to be interesting, the last thing I'll say about that fight, it's going to be a 5-round fight. A lot of people think that if it was 5 rounds with Usman and Chimaev, Usman may have got that. So it's going to be interesting to see, how Chimaev's cardio holds up in a 5-round fight. And that's definitely going to favor Robert Whittaker since he's been in so many 5-round fights. So we definitely spoke about what could be, in the future for Dricus. For Izzy, Brett, I think he's got 2 options here. I think the first option is he could fight one of these up-and-comers. We do got Nasruddin Imavov going up against Brandon Allen. Maybe he could fight the winner of that. We're going to be talking about another guy in Kyle Bohio, who I'm absolutely in love with. Maybe if he could get that win, maybe he could fight Izzy. That could be an interesting matchup. If Izzy doesn't want to fight one of these young guys, then the only thing I could think about is maybe have him sit out again, let the Dricus and Strickland fight happen, and if Strickland loses, you could definitely sell Izzy and Strickland as a co-main event. He's coming off of a loss, and he thinks that he lost that because he was just flat, and it wasn't the best Izzy performance. And I would love to see that rematch, and I think if Strickland loses against Dricus again, I think he'd be down for that again, because that'd be a huge payoff for both of them. So I think those are the 2 options for Izzy, Brett. And what are your thoughts about Izzy's future?
Yeah, I agree. I think that he could hold out for Alex at light heavyweight. Maybe if Alex goes and knocks out Khalil Roundtree, say Rakic beats Ankalaev and they don't give Rakic a title shot because he just got knocked out by Yuri. Maybe that then slides Adesanya in for a chance at Alex Pereira. But, do you think that Adesanya has it in him to go back down in the rankings and take down 2 to 3 guys to get himself back into title contention? I feel like he is at this level almost to where Conor McGregor is, not quite, that he almost guarantees himself a title shot with a victory, or, we haven't seen him in a non-title contest in, I believe, about 8 years. So, I think that that's something that might be on the table for him, is his first non-title contest, maybe against somebody else down in the division. Now, who would you like to see him face? He's really cleaned out everybody, like we're saying, with Dricus, even more so with Izzy. Would you want to see him fight one of these younger prospects? I know Shara Bullett's away, but what if he took on a Joe Pyfer and they made him fight the most powerful guy in the division?
Honestly, Brett, if he's not going to fight, like a Sean Strickland, which I think that would be my top choice against Strickland, because I think that would be fireworks with the press conference and everything as a co-main event. But if you're talking about one of these young guys lower down the rankings, I like the guy we're going to speak about later who's fighting this week. I would like to see him fight Kyle Bohio. Kyle Bohio is a great all-around fighter that could strike, knock you out. And also, if it needs to go down to the ground, he has some ground game as well. So I think that would be an interesting matchup, and I think he's just as talented as it comes.
Yeah, that'd be grappler versus striker. He just struggled with the grappling of Du Plessis, so see if he can get it done against a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. But we're going to talk about the Barallo matchup with Cannonier this weekend. I think that is kind of a tricky matchup for the young Barallos. So we'll see if he can get past the veteran in Cannonier. But yeah, I mean, I like what you're saying, but what with Sean Strickland, but we just never know. That fight was so close with Strickland and Du Plessis the first time. Strickland could go back in there and win that title. And then is there really that much of a call for a rematch between Izzy and Du Plessis? And then he has to wait for that fight to even get done, for that. I don't know. I think that it's either going to be the end of the road for him, or he's going to move on to 205 pounds and just kind of pick his shot and maybe try and get one back at Alex and become a double champion and retire on that. If it's not those, one of those two things, I really don't think he's going to go back down the rankings and fight somebody like we were saying. But it's happened in the past with guys like Jose Aldo, who've been on long title runs, and then they've had to go back down in the rankings and earn their way back. So some guys just bite the bullet and do it, but others, have been to the mountaintop and don't want to go back over that again. So at his age, he may call it quits, and it's been a Hall of Fame career if he does.
Yeah, I wouldn't blame him, Brett. And one last thing I'll say before we move on. There has been, some talks, rumors that maybe he does move up to light heavyweight, but obviously he doesn't fight Alex right away. But there's been some rumors about him maybe matching up against a Yuri Prochazka. And that being a good matchup, because Yuri Prochazka is a guy that a lot of people say can fight at middleweight. So he's not a super, super overly sized light heavyweight. So that would be an interesting matchup for Brett if Izzy decided to fight Yuri Prochazka at light heavyweight. But I know it's just rumors. I don't really see that happening, but it's definitely something interesting to think about.
Yeah, it would certainly be a good matchup. Now, he doesn't have the one-punch knockout power like Alex Pereira does. So I think I'd actually probably favor Yuri in that with his aggressive style. I don't know how Izzy would keep him off him.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting. I think he needs a little bit of parity. He needs some type of change. And I think maybe moving up a weight class, trying to go after Alex, a guy you've knocked out in your last rivalry fight against him. And Alex even called him out after some of his victories, and Adesanya was away after the loss to Strickland, and Alex wanted him to come back and fight him. So this is a fight that I believe Alex would take gladly. And, maybe Izzy just waits again and picks his shot.
Yeah. But obviously we have some other news outside of UFC 305. Something we talked about last week, Dana White, broke the news during our podcast, during episode 8, that he said Conor McGregor would not be fighting this year. Well, Conor McGregor immediately went to social media and said that, he's going to be fighting in December. Then Dana White said that his phone was being blown up by Conor McGregor all night and says that he's set and is down to fight for December. Now, all of a sudden, there's rumors saying Dana White is open to the idea. Honestly, Brett, I don't know what's going on here. I'm not sure if they're just trying to hype the fight up more or just, constantly keeping Conor McGregor's name, in the news. But I don't know what to think about this, Brett. I don't know whether the fight's happening or not. But what are your thoughts about this, Brett? And do you want to see this fight happening in December?
Yeah, I think I want to see it in December. I think that is, if he stops drinking right now today, I think it's enough time. But, if we're going to continue seeing him, going to BKFC events or posting, pictures at the Black Forge Inn, drinking his whiskey and drinking his Irish stout, then I don't think it's enough time. But if he's going to take this seriously and he's going to get a good 3-4 months of training camp, he's going to get back in fighting shape. He's going to stop drinking alcohol in excess leading up to the fight. I think that it will be good, but he's got to manage those things that are kind of dragging him down in his personal life. I believe, maybe lack of dedication to the sport. I don't think he's in there 5 days, 6 days, 7 days a week, doing the hard training and sparring like a lot of these guys are, like Sean Strickland and some of the guys at the upper echelon of the company. But, Conor McGregor is a historic fighter, and he does have, knockout power. He's one of the most creative strikers, and I believe if he comes back against Chandler, it's a style matchup that suits him. So, I like Conor McGregor in the matchup, and if he can come in some type of, good physical condition and mentally strong, I think there's a good chance he can win. But what his career is after that, I don't know. But I'd like to see a good outing from him in December. I'm really excited that he wants to come back this year, and I think it'd be a perfect way to close out the year if he could make it there healthy and ready to go. Yeah,
Brett, I really think it is going to end up happening in December. I think you're just using a tactic to build up the fight even more. I think especially with it being, canceled already once, I think when this fight does officially happen and we do get that official, press conference a few days before the fight and we get to see Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler going at each other, it's going to be really exciting, Brett, and that's when it's going to feel real for me. But unfortunately, Brett, until that day comes, it's going to be hard for me to get hyped for this fight. I love Conor McGregor, and I've been a huge fan of him, since the beginning. Even before he became, UFC champion and beat Jose Aldo. But I can't wait to see it. I really hope it happens. Like you said, McGregor definitely has to make some sacrifices, and with the money he has, it's tough to make those types of sacrifices. What is there to gain from him, fighting again? He's already got all the money he could ever want and need. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see. But I think at the end of the day, Brett McGregor in his heart loves to fight. It's what he does. Obviously, he did it to make a living, but I also think he did it because that's what he loves to do. And I think, it's been, itching at him. And just to say he could come back from that devastating injury and beat a top 10 guy in the world, I think that's good enough for him to motivate him to make that sacrifice and be able to fight in December.
Yeah, I think I agree, but I think the sole reason that he continues fighting right now, obviously it's not for money, like you said, it's legacy. He somewhere in his mind still wants to be remembered as the greatest fighter of all time, because at one time, that's how people were talking about him. Before the Floyd Mayweather fight, when he just beat Eddie Alvarez, 2-division champion, everybody he has favored 4-1 over Rafael Dos Anjos, so they didn't even make the fight. He was a superstar. He was something that we've never seen before and may never see again. And if he can get a victory over Michael Chandler, the realm of possibility opens back up for this guy. He could immediately get thrown into a title match with Islam Makhachev. So if he's saying that he's taking this seriously, he gets in good fighting shape at 170, keeps that rolling after a victory, and can somehow get back down to 155 pounds, he has the opportunity to put on the biggest fight in the history of the company, him versus number one pound for pound Islam Makhachev, Khabib in the corner, legacy on the line. He could retire the lightweight champion. That is the biggest fight that could possibly be made in the sport, in my opinion. And he's one win away from it. And he's got to take this seriously. I don't see him going and trying to fight at 170 pounds. I just think that's too, for a title, obviously. I know this was going to be competed at 170, but with a win, I think that the realistic fight for a title is Islam Makhachev, based on the reasons I just said. But he's one fight away from that, and he has to capitalize on this moment against Michael Chandler. So if he does come back in December, I just hope he's at 100%, because like I said, the realm of possibility, if he does come out there and spark Michael Chandler and knock him out and set the world on fire, he could do anything again.
Yeah, and even if he doesn't want to make the cut to 155, you could even see him in another main event and get to Charles Oliveira at 170. Charles Oliveira's already talked about fighting at 170, and he wants to fight Conor McGregor. That would be a huge marketable fight, him and Charles. It's the guy, in a division that McGregor once fought in that never got to fight Conor McGregor. It's a legend of the game, and I would love to see that fight either way. But like you said, Brett, if he gets a win over Michael Chandler, the UFC is definitely going to try to push him in to get a fight with Islam Makhachev. And I think with everything that's happened and how long we spent without seeing McGregor, and with all the bad blood between him and Khabib and what happened with the first fight, I think that would break UFC records, and it'd probably be an even bigger UFC gate and buy than the McGregor and Khabib fight the first time. It would be huge, Brett, and I would definitely love to see it.
Yeah, it would be massive. And I mean, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility either. Now, when you were saying that he could fight Charles Oliveira at 170, absolutely, and people would pay to watch that fight. But what does that do for Conor McGregor's legacy? Not a whole bunch, in my opinion. Where does that lead? Why are we here? What's the story that's going to be told? I think that it leads back to the rivalry contest with Islam Makhachev if Conor can make the weight. But he really has to take some of his lifestyle habits out of, and turn them around if he wants to be able to do these incredible things that I believe he still can do if his mind's right.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's one thing to gain. If he did beat Charles Oliveira, he would be beating a former champion in the same division that he used to fight in. He does have wins over a lot of other former champions, and be another former champion that he could add to his resume. It's basically like Khabib Nurmagomedov and Charles Oliveira are the two great champions that were lightweights in his era that he really didn't get to either fight or beat. And obviously, Islam Makhachev kind of came around towards the end of McGregor, so I kind of consider that as different eras a little bit. But I think him and Charles Oliveira would be an interesting fight, Brett. But obviously, him and Islam Makhachev would be just fireworks, and that's the fight to make, Brett. And I know we talked about John Jones and, Tom Aspinall, but with as big as a marketable guy and as a fan favorite as McGregor is, I think McGregor and Islam would be an even bigger fight than that.
Yeah, I think McGregor and Islam would break the UFC's pay-per-view record. I really do.
We also had some other, breaking news from Dana White himself. He did announce the UFC 307 pay-per-view. I know you weren't too happy about his choices, Brett, but he did announce that the UFC 307 pay-per-view in Utah is going to be led by Alex Pereira, defending the light heavyweight championship against Khalil Roundtree. Now, Alex Pereira, comes and saves another main event. It was seeming like it was going to be Topuria versus Holloway, but they got moved to 308 because of the Islam injury. So insert Alex Pereira again. Every time the UFC needs a guy to save a pay-per-view, he comes right in. He saved UFC 300, and then he came back in again in June and saved another pay-per-view. He also saved last year when John Jones got hurt. So Alex Pereira continues to be the cash cow for the UFC, Brett. There's definitely some interesting matchups. But obviously, the main event is what's got people most upset. I definitely got some thoughts about this, Brett. Khalil Roundtree, does he deserve it? No, absolutely not. Was he probably one big fight away from it? I do think so. I do think that's why the UFC really wanted to have Khalil Roundtree against Jamal Hill, because that's exactly the win that would give, definitely give him the right to fight in this. And if he did beat a Jamal Hill, no one would be complaining about Khalil Roundtree fighting. But unfortunately, he did get tested for PEDs. There's definitely some controversy there. I'm not sure if he really did anything wrong. I think it was something that, happened without his knowledge, just by accident. But you never really know the true story. But honestly, Brett, if they're trying to protect Alex Pereira, knowing that, Ankalaev's a nightmare matchup, and that's probably going to be where Alex's title run ends, then who else out there in this division can you give other than Ankalaev? Everyone's either lost or, is undeserving or Alex beat. Khalil Roundtree is on a tremendous fight win streak. He's super, super exciting. He doesn't really grapple at all, and he just straight up boxes with you and tries to TKO you. Now, I know that's going to go right into Alex Pereira's hands, so it seems like it's going to be an easy fight for Alex. But I definitely think it's going to give us fireworks and give us a finish. So I'm not really that upset about it, Brett, but I know you think differently, so I'm interested to see your thoughts.
I don't have it. All right. So I don't have any problem with Khalil Roundtree taking the fight. You have to take the opportunity that's given to you. And I hope he makes the best of it. Khalil Roundtree is an explosive striker, and maybe he has an opportunity to, do the unthinkable. Now for Alex Pereira, I don't have anything against him either, because he's going out here, like you mentioned, saving card after card after card after card, and doing his best and trying to get the most title defenses in as he can possibly get in. But I have a problem with, I don't necessarily think it's solely Dana, but the matchmakers, the brass at the UFC, putting the best fighters on a queue while letting these guys who maybe sell more tickets, get these belts and certain things. We just saw this with Bilal Muhammad. 10 victories in a row Bilal Muhammad had to get before given a title opportunity. Ankalaev has not lost since he lost to Paul Craig. This guy is on an absolute tear. Now, I even thought he won the draw that he had with Blachowicz. I think he should have been champion 2 years ago. But when he goes out of that draw and he says the comments that he said against the UFC, saying they must not want Russian champions, these scorecards are illegitimate. Those were the words that came out of Ankalaev's mouth that night, and he was very displeased with how the scorecards were read for that draw. But you can't say those things. The company's going to take it back out on you. But you can't keep doing this the same way to all these great fighters. Bilal Muhammad gets pushed to the queue. Tom Aspinall right now getting pushed to the queue. He is the best fighter in that division. We both think it. And now Ankalaev getting pushed back as well. We got to start getting the most competitive fighters in the most competitive fights instead of selling tickets. And I think since the Fertittas left the company, slowly but surely we're seeing this morph into the tickets matter and the sales matter and eyeballs matter more than who's the best martial artist in the world.
Yeah, Brett, and you could even say the same thing kind of happened with Merab. Maybe it took him a while to finally get a title shot, but there was a lot to play at there because he didn't really want to fight Aljamain Sterling because that was his friend. So maybe it didn't necessarily happen with him. But Brett, it seems like that's what separates mixed martial arts and boxing from all the other sports. In every other sport, you just have to be good and you just have to be, just win. And that's all that matters. It doesn't matter how you win in the NBA or the NFL. If you win, you win. It doesn't matter. But, it feels like, in the fighting game, you not only have to win, but you have to be excited and you have to put fans in the seats. It is a business, and it just seems like that's the difference between the fighting game and other sports. And it's definitely unfair, Brett. And, I don't necessarily agree with it. I definitely think the guy who is the best at every, given moment should fight. Unless if the top guy in the division has already fought for the belt. For a guy like Ankalaev who, hasn't really got a true test. I know he had an interim title belt that was a draw, and he was upset about that. He thinks there's some controversy in that, and he thinks the draw was the reason to get him from being the champion. So it definitely seems like, they're definitely protecting Alex, but I definitely think they're not going to be able to deny him for too long. The UFC definitely tries to, have the guys who are going to sell the most tickets, but at some point, Brett, it definitely comes to an end. We see it with every single fighter, like, you mentioned Bilal. Eventually, the UFC couldn't deny him anymore. And I think that's what's going to happen with Ankalaev. I think he's going to go out there, like he said, he's going to take all his anger out on Rakic, and I think he's going to get an easy KO win. And then, I don't think they're going to be able to deny him, and he's going to have to fight Alex next year. So I think the UFC is only going to push him out one more fight. They figured, if you can make an argument that Ankalaev hasn't been a true guy in the top 5, a true guy to give him a title shot. So I guess, with a win over Rakic, that kind of ends that debate. And, it lets the UFC get 2 more fights of championship fights with Alex Pereira.
Yeah, it's just concerning to me because I've been a believer that Magomed Ankalaev is the best 205-pound fighter in the world. When Vadim Nemkov was the champion in Bellator, I believed he was. He's now moved up to the heavyweight division, hasn't fought for about a year, so I no longer consider him a light heavyweight. So I think that Magomed Ankalaev is the best 205-pound fighter in the world. I think that he would be favored over Alex Pereira if they fought. I think the threat of the takedown would be just too massive. Now, here's the thing with all of Alex Pereira's opponents, which I want to get your opinion on this, because Khalil Roundtree came out today and said, I don't shoot for takedowns in my fight. I knock guys out. That's how I'm going to try and beat Alex in an interview. Now, we've seen Jamal Hill try that. Didn't work out too well. We saw Yuri try that. Didn't work out too well. What do you think about the game plan? We've talked about how this, you need to have a grappling approach against Pereira just due to how technical and his potential on the feet. What do you think about Khalil Roundtree not wanting to take the fight to the ground?
I think it's an ego thing, Brett. And, he ultimately is a striker at the end of the day. He's not really a grappler. And I don't think he wants to try to do something that he's not comfortable doing. What he's been doing is working for him, and he probably has all the confidence in the world. And he knows that's what the UFC wants. He knows a big part of the reason why he's getting pushed into this is because he is an exciting fighter. If he was a guy on a 5-fight win streak that was just out grappling guys and wasn't really exciting and it was just by decisions, I don't think he would get this fight. So he knows the UFC brass is giving it to him. The matchmakers are giving it to him because of how exciting he is. And I think he's going to give the UFC fans what they want. Because he knows if he goes out there and even loses, if it's exciting and sells tickets and the fans like it, the UFC is going to do good by him and give him, more money and, bigger fights going forward. So I think he's going to try to make an exciting fight, win or lose. And he's going to try to, hopefully that, he can knock him out. And I know that's hard to say, but maybe he can shock the world. But I wouldn't pick anybody against Alex if you're trying to knock him out.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, for these fighters, these are incredible fighters. Like I said, explosive athlete in Khalil Roundtree. Both of these guys are knockout artists. Now, I'm complaining a little bit about, Yuri getting a second chance at Alex or Khalil Roundtree, but it's the politics of how it's going. It's not the fights. These are badass fights. Alex Pereira and Yuri is an amazing fight for the fans. Khalil Roundtree and Alex is an amazing fight for the fans. That is going to be a war. Someone's going to sleep violently, so that is a great
fight.
But I just feel bad for Ankalaev because his skill set isn't inducive for fans to really care about his game. But I do think he's one of the best in the world, and I think that he needs an opportunity for the belt once again.
Yeah, but I know a lot of people complain and say, oh, how can a guy with a win and his best win being over Anthony Smith get a title shot? Yeah. Well, on the flip side, how can you say a guy whose best win over Johnny Walker deserves a title shot as well? And that's what you can say about Ankalaev. So I definitely think he's got to be the guy who deserves it the most, but I'm not too mad that the UFC is going to make him wait one more fight. But there's also some other good fights on this, Brett. Unfortunately, we do get the idea and, confirmation that we're not going to get Stephen Wonderboy Thompson against Michael Venom Page. But this is an exciting matchup. We get Stephen Thompson going up against Joaquin Buckley. That's going to be an interesting fight for the division. Buckley's trending right now, and that would be a huge win for him, and that's a huge matchup in that division. We got the legend Jose Aldo fighting another, one of these, young up-and-comers. He did that in his last fight, and he's going to take out another one in Mario Batista. That's going to be an interesting matchup, Brett, and I'm surprised Jose Aldo is going to take another shot at one of these young up-and-comers. We do got Roman Delunze going up against Kevin Holland, two vets of the game. That's going to be an exciting fight. I'm real excited about this fight in the featherweight division. I think this is going to have huge implications on what could be, future title contenders. We got Mozart Ivoyev going up against Aljamain Sterling, which I think is going to be a tremendous display, of two great grapplers. And I can't wait to see how that's going to go. It's going to be the toughest test for Mozart. It's going to be probably the best grappler he's gone up against. And, when you got two grapplers, it probably goes on the feet. And I think Sterling's probably the better guy in the feet. So it's going to be interesting to see how that fight goes. We also got, Pennington going up against Piana for the Bantamweight Women's Championship Battle of the World. So we got some interesting fights on this card, Brett. And what are your thoughts on this card as a whole?
Yeah, I really like UFC 307. Jose Aldo, Mario Batista, Aljamain Sterling, Mozart Ivoyev. I think those are great fights. Sterling has looked fantastic since moving up in weight. And Mozart Ivoyev is undefeated, and he's a Russian contender. We know what his game is. We saw him versus Diego Lopez. And I think that if he gets a victory over Aljamain Sterling, he's probably going to be knocking down the door of a title shot too. So I think there's a lot of interesting fights on this card, and I can't wait for the rest of this year. As far as these pay-per-views are concerned, they're pretty terrific.
Yeah, bro, I definitely think we're going to be into some treats. I know we don't get a lot of great fight nights. We do got a good one this week, but, we got a lot of great pay-per-views coming up. Yep. But we have to get back to the rest of the card from UFC 305. We had a huge upset here, Brett. We had Kai Kara France, KO, and Steve Erceg. My boy Steve Erceg, Brett, I've been in love with the guy, but definitely disappointed. And, it was upsetting, Brett, because I thought when the fight started, he looked technically sound. He looked like everything was going his way. He was making good jabs. He was dodging punches. He looked fast. He looked crisp. But then he got caught. And that's what happens sometimes, Brett. Sometimes you get clipped, and that's all it takes. And a guy like Car France, who's KO'd people before, if he gets you really good, that's all it's going to take. And what a great, impressive win for him. For a guy like Car France to come back from that, split decision loss to Armella Bazzi, who some people thought was controversial, and some people thought, Car France should have won that fight. And because Albazi won that fight, people have been saying Albazi should be the next title contender against Pantoja. But you can make an argument that Car France, had a very, very good, compelling argument to win that fight. And then coming back and getting a KO win against a tremendous strike, trending upward fighter in Steve Erceg, who nearly beat Pantoja. I think you can make the argument, Brett, that Car France can earn a title shot off this. If you look at it, everybody else is booked up in the division. There's not a true title contender. I know we spoke about last week about the new guy who's coming into the UFC, but I don't want to see a guy in his UFC debut get a title shot. So if everybody's booked up, Brett, I wouldn't be mad. Given the split decision loss to Albazi and then getting this KO win, I wouldn't be mad, Brett, if they gave Car France the next title shot against Pantoja. But how impressed were you, Brett, by Car France?
Oh, super impressed. I think this was the statement win of his career. Before this one, it was Cody Garbrandt. And now, obviously, he's got a new one, picked up a big win over a former title challenger and Steve Erceg. Now, what you were saying about Erceg, he looked good and technical to start. He did. But one thing I noticed almost immediately in the fight was that Erceg was fighting very tall. He was standing very straight up, very not in an athletic or a type of stance. He looked like he was fighting almost like Sean Strickland does, but he doesn't have the defense of Sean Strickland. You know what I'm saying? But he was fighting very upright. And that stuck out to me. And he got stuck with punches really quick. He didn't get to go to the ground. Me and you both thought that he would have a grappling advantage in this one. Kai Kara France has been submitted 3 times, and Usyk had 6 submission victories coming into this one. But he wanted to stay on the feet with him. He did have a little bit of length on him, but it didn't really matter. And Kai Kara France got inside, landed some big punches, and this one was really all over. So Kai Kara France put on a dominant performance. I do believe he deserves the next title shot after this, but I think it's a matchup nightmare for him with Alexandre Pantoja. Pantoja is very tough. I think he'll be able to take the punches of Kai Kara France on the feet and also get well-timed takedowns and advance his grappling as well. Sorry, I got a little bit of a sore throat dealing with some allergies. But, I think that Kai Kara France really put on an impressive performance this weekend, cashed as an almost 3-1 dog, and earns the next title opportunity with a victory. But I don't think he gets it done because Alexandre Pantoja is just too skilled in some of the facets that Kai Kara France lacks in.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brett. I think in a future matchup, he probably doesn't get it past Pantoja, but that's no knock. That's not to sneeze at. Pantoja is one of the 10 best fighters in the world. He's the best flyweight in the world, and I think Pantoja, when it's all said and done, maybe not be the GOAT because Demetrius Johnson is going to be the all-time GOAT, but Pantoja will be on that short list of one of the greatest flyweights in UFC history.
He's definitely passing Moreno and Figueiredo in short notice. And then after that, it's really only him and DJ. You just got to keep picking up these victories.
Yeah. We also had another upset, Brett. I think this upset was probably even bigger, especially since I was so confident in Matthias Gamrot. And I take back everything I said, Brett. I've been hyping up Gamrot. I've been talking about, him going on a title run and maybe fighting, Sarukian for an interim title belt. But I take all that back, Brett. Gamrot was impressive to start the fight. He definitely was showing intent to stay on the feet and showed impressive striking. He's definitely a better striker than, people give him credit for. But definitely as the fight got on, Brett, I think Dan Hooker won the last 2 rounds. He definitely showed he was the better fighter for most of the night. He was hurting Gamrot on the feet. And it seems like as the fight went on, Brett, Gamrot started, to try to, struggle and was desperate and was trying to do whatever he can to get the fight to the ground. And it seems like he was just shooting for takedowns out of necessity and desperation and was just doing it to survive the fight. And Dan Hooker wasn't, allowing him to do anything off them. And, I'm very, very impressed with Dan Hooker. As, much I could, put down Matthias Gamrot, I have to, give Dan Hooker his praise. He's on a nice little win streak, and now he's going to be very close, if not in the top 5 in the lightweight division. I think he's probably 1 or 2 fights away, Brett, from fighting for the title belt in this division. He's going to have some huge tests coming up. But now after getting a huge win against a trending guy like Matthias Gamrot and being as a high marketable guy, Dan Hooker's a fan favorite that the fans love, and he's an exciting fighter. So that's help give him a push up to the division. But I think Brett, he's definitely going to challenge a top 5 guy or a top 3 guy, and he's probably going to be one huge win away from fighting for the title. There's some interesting guys, Brett, he can fight. I would like to see him fight Justin Gaethje. 2 great strikers. I think that would be very, very exciting. But Dan Hooker did say that he bumped into the UFC brass, and right now they're talking about maybe him versus Charles Oliveira. I think that might be a tough matchup with Charles Oliveira's grappling. I think that could be a nightmare for Dan Hooker. But that would be a tough matchup that if he gets a win, that puts him right into title contention, Brett. But how impressed were you by Dan Hooker getting this win?
I really liked the performance from Dan Hooker. This was a close fight, and it was, in my opinion, the closest fight on the entire card. I'm going to read you the statistics here, Anthony. I want to see your opinion on this. ESPN actually had Gamrot outlanding Hooker in this fight, 88-82, and also in significant strikes, only trailed Hooker by 1 shot, 64-65. Now, while we were watching the fight, I almost would guarantee my life that Dan Hooker was landing more punches on the feet than Matthias Gamrot. But he must have been sneaking in shots against the cage in control or something like that. But I didn't see 88 strikes landed or 64 significant strikes landed for Matthias Gamrot in that fight. He did land 5 takedowns out of the 15 that he attempted. Now, that's pretty good statistics for Hooker, who has struggled with grapplers in the past. But with Gamrot only landing 30% of his takedowns in that fight, I thought that was really good defense from Hooker for a majority of the contest. He did land the bigger damage in the contest. I had him winning the 1st and 3rd round, I believe it was. I had him going 29-28. One judge went the other way. But I thought it was a great win for Hooker. I think that this puts him in a opportunity that he hasn't been in quite some time since that loss to Dustin Poirier on his first original title push. So I really like the performance of Dan Hooker. He moved to 24-12, and he's going to move up the rankings. I think that a matchup with Charles Oliveira wouldn't really do him too well. And I think that a matchup like with what you were saying with Justin Gaethje would really be a fan-friendly fight that you could put as a fight night main event in one of these, in one of these cards that you put in like Oklahoma City or like Charlotte or something like that. I think that it could headline a fight night card in front of fans, certainly.
Yeah, 100%. And I love Dan Hooker, Brett, and I was definitely a fan of him before, but now I'm a really huge fan. When he was all bloodied up and he's got cuts, above his eye, and he's sitting there laughing in his corner, telling his guys, I love this, and it's absolutely insane, Brett, because he's a guy who's taking a lot of damage, even in the Jalen Turner fight, that he took a lot of damage as well, but he's a tough guy that just likes to sit in there and just loves to fight, and I definitely think that helps him out. When he gets into these wars with people, it's going to be tough, to outgrit him. He's going to fight to the end. He's going to fight to the death. He absolutely loves to do it. You could beat him up as much as you can, and he's just going to laugh at you and keep coming back, even harder. And I love Dan Hooker, and I can't wait to see, and I really hope he does go on a huge title run, off this huge win.
One thing that reminded me when you said Jalen Turner, I want to ask you about this, and this was actually my initial point. I forgot about what I was saying with Mateus Gamrot. I think Mateus Gamrot is struggling with length a little bit. I don't necessarily think that his grappling has gotten worse or that he's like not well-rounded. I think when he fights these guys like Dan Hooker or Jalen Turner that are 5 inches taller than him or have like 6 inches of reach, I think it's just hard for him to get inside and get those takedowns that he's so easily getting on these fighters his own size, like a Sarukian or a Garam Kutaladze or, Ismagulov and the guys that he's fighting. So I think when he's fighting people that are like 6 foot and up, at 155 pounds, he's having a little bit more difficulty getting on the inside. He's getting hit by shots to where he can't really grab him around the waist, and he can only really take punishment on the outside. So I think that the length's really bothering Gamrot. What do you think?
Yeah, that's 100% a good point, but I never thought about that. I always wonder, what, his kryptonite is, because, he beats, tremendous fighters, and then will, lose the guys that are lower down the rankings. And I was just wondering, why is that? And now you made that point, Brett, that could be an absolute, pinpoint. They could just be that he struggles with guys who just, outlength them. And maybe, that reach is a huge disadvantage for him. And maybe that is his kryptonite. And, if he can't get over that, Brett, he's never going to really be a serious title contender. And he's going to have to do a lot of, soul searching after this. As close of a fight as it was, he's going to have a huge, huge time now. And he's going to need a lot of fights. And he's probably going to need, maybe 3 or 4 wins to get back in a true title shot again.
Yeah, it really was. And this was a fight that was set up for him to win, I feel like. The UFC brass couldn't have made this one and thought Dan Hooker was going to come out victorious. He was a 4-1 favorite, was Gamrot, as the time the fight closed. So, I thought this was really a bad look for him. Now, there were some people online that said he actually won this fight due to the 5 takedowns, and then you see the ESPN stats afterwards. And you realize that maybe it's a little closer in the striking than what we realized. Who did you have the fight scored for? And do you think there was a case for Gamrot?
I definitely think you could make a case for him. I definitely think it was real close, and I could see why it could potentially, be a split decision. But I definitely had Dan Hooker, just like you said, Brett. When you watch the fight, without looking at any stats or anything, it just seemed like Dan Hooker was the better guy out there. And that's just kind of like how I summed it up. And it's really like weird, Brett, because the fight was so close. It's even hard to say what rounds, won, who won what rounds. Each round could have went to either or. But just honestly, Brett, when I just look at the fight as a whole, I just thought Dan Hooker was the better man. And I just felt like, for probably more so than not, he was the better fighter. So I thought he deserved the 29-28 victory. But I wouldn't be mad if anybody tried to make the argument for Gamrot.
No, I wouldn't either. It was just one of those fights that, It reminds me a little bit of when Danny Sabatello fought Rufián Stotts the first time. Sabatello had so much ground control, but that's really all he was doing, was just controlling against the cage, and really wasn't landing significant strikes. And Hooker was the one doing the damage. So one thing of note also, betting fans and fight fans, the underdog won in both this contest, the co-main event, and the main event. If you'd have put a parlay in on Du Plessis, Dan Hooker, and Kai Kara France, you would have made a lot of money.
Yeah, 100%, Brett. There was a lot of upsets definitely on this card. Yeah. One fight that I don't think wasn't an upset. It was one fight that we disagreed with. But I was all over Jairzinho Rozenstruik from the beginning. But Jairzinho Rozenstruik got the win over Tai Tuivasa. Wasn't the finish like I thought. Was a lot of times where you thought it would be a finish. But I thought Tai Tuivasa, even in defeat, Brett, just like I said with Adesanya, looked better than I thought. He had his moments where it looked like he could have potentially won this fight as well. But overall, for most of the fight, I thought Rozenstruik displayed, a great kickboxing. He was dodging a lot of punches, was very efficient with his strikes, and, had another, great performance after a great performance against Gaziev. So it's back-to-back good performances for Rozenstruik, and now he's going to challenge and get another chance at a top 10 heavyweight going forward, Brett. And I was definitely impressed with him. And, for Tai Tuivasa, it seems like at this point he's going to have to start fighting these heavyweights who are just outside the rankings and maybe become a gatekeeper for, the top 15 of the heavyweight division. But what were your thoughts and reactions to this fight, Brett?
I really liked how I liked what you said, but I really liked what Tai Tuivasa had in the third round. You were saying that he won some of the, was looking good in some spots. I thought that he looked really good in that third round at times. Now, I don't think he necessarily won the round because of what Rozenstruik was doing, in the beginning, but towards the end of the round, and what his coaches were telling him going into that final round in between the second and third is that he needed to finish, he needed to win the fight by knockout. And he did try and go do that. But, I just think Tai Tuivasa he went too far at the sun, and now he got burnt. On his first title run, he went further than he ever thought that he was going to go. Once he beat Derek Lewis, it goes, you get that, oh crap, what now? Well, now you got to fight Ciryl Gane, Pavlovich, Tybura, and Rozenstruik back to back. That's what you got to do. So he really almost outkicked his coverage in his first title run, and now he's paying for it because he has to move back down the rankings slowly against these guys who are also main eventing cards. So, I think that it's about time for him to take on Jared Vanderaa or Parker Porter just to get his confidence back. We've been talking about these guys like Romanov and some of these. Now, I mean, Gaziev's a little bit better than that, but there are guys in the heavyweight division that probably shouldn't be in the UFC, and I think it's time Tai Tuivasa goes and scores a couple knockout wins over guys like that so he can get his confidence back.
Yeah, I like that idea, Brett, of Gaziev against Tai Tuivasa. Both guys who just lost to Rozenstruik. I think, Gaziev, coming back and getting a win. I think he can challenge a guy just inside the top 15, and I think that's the type of guy where, Tai Tuivasa has to fight too. He's going to have to fight one of these guys just outside, the top 15, whether if that's, a Mick Parton or some of these other guys. But like I said, I would like to see him fight Gaziev. You could definitely have that as one of those typical heavyweight UFC fight night in the Apex. And I like that. But for Rozenstruik, he's definitely going to have to get a top 10 heavyweight. Honestly, Brett, I'd like to see him get Tybura. Tybura's coming off a loss against Speedbach. He's inside the top 10. It would definitely test Rozenstruik's grappling ability, and it would test Tybura's striking ability again. And I think that would be a good matchup for Rozenstruik to maybe try to crack the top 10 again.
Yeah, I cannot believe those two have not fought yet. Going back and looking over their record, that's the matchup that almost has to be made. Those guys have both been in the top 15, top 20 of the world for about 5, 6, 7 years now. So that's definitely the striker versus grappler matchup that I want to see too.
Yeah, and there were some other guys that stood out, Brett, and some other thoughts from UFC 305. One guy that really stood out to me was the guy that I previewed coming into this card, Carlos Pratis. He did exactly what I thought, Brett. He looked patient. His hands were super, super fast. He's super, super accurate. And that all led to a brutal KO win. Like I said, Brett, the guy's super, super talented. I loved him coming into this. He's undefeated in the UFC so far. I think right now he can challenge a top 15 welterweight guy. But right now he's calling out Chaos Williams. He said he wants to have one more easy fight before he challenges the top 15 guy. I wouldn't mind seeing him fight Chaos Williams. He's a KO artist as well. And he's a guy who may not be in the top 15, but is a top 25 guy who's trending upwards as well. So I wouldn't mind seeing that, Brett. But either way, he's the guy who's trending upward, and I wouldn't want to fight Carlos Prates if I was a welterweight either. But what were your thoughts about this fight card, Brett, and what are some other things that stood out to you?
Carlos Prates is my new favorite fighter. 9 knockout wins in a row. The guy smokes cigarettes indoors. He does whatever he wants. This guy is an absolute character. I love him. You know, a member of the Fighting Nerds, all those guys over there, John Silva, Kai Barallo, him. That's a great camp coming up. 9 knockout wins in a row. Like I said, that you don't see that very often. You know, some guys don't even go on 9-fight win streaks. And this guy's getting guys out of there. And, you know, for Li Jingliang, that's a tough man. You know, he's not someone who goes and lays down for anybody. Now, I know that he got dominated by Khamzat Chimaev. And he's been knocked out in the past as well, but he knocked out Santiago Ponzinibbio, who at one time had a lot of hype behind him too. So he's derailed hype trains like Prates in the past. Prates passed the test with flying colors. I mean, that left hook in the third round, you could almost see it coming. Li Jingliang could not take any more of the punishment of Carlos Prates. He's just so athletic and long. He throws that left hand like he's throwing a baseball, and just absolutely has power behind it that can shut your lights out. On the broadcast, though, I don't know if you caught this, Daniel Cormier, almost a minute before the fight ended by knockout, goes, "Oh, Prates is just throwing one at a time. He doesn't have the power to put him out with just one shot." And then literally a minute later, he puts him out with one left hook. I couldn't believe that, the commentary team was kind of not knowing the skills and ability of Carlos Prates. But he showed him he's got one punch knockout power.
Yeah, 100%, Brett. And, that gym, the Fighting Nerds, that's an impressive gym on the come up. And all those guys seem to be, winning now. And, if I was a fighter and I was fighting a guy from that gym, I'd be definitely scared as well. But obviously, Brett, we definitely got some stuff going on this weekend. We got a huge middleweight belt. Speaking about guys, you were talking about all these upcoming middleweights. One of the guys that I'm, definitely most impressed with is Kyle Bohio. We got him going up against Jared Cannonier. This matchup is going to be very, very pivotal for the outlook of this division. And definitely, project and, propel someone into title contention. But like I said, Brett, there's definitely a lot of guys in this weight class in the middleweight. Guys between the ages of 25 and around 31, 32 years old who are on the come up. But honestly, Brett, when I look at Kyle Bohio, with the striking ability and the grappling ability in this all-around game, Brett, I would put Kyle Bohio right now as the second best guy in that class of young middleweights behind Khamzat Chimaev. I like Kyle Bohio's potential better than a Bo Nickel. I like him better than Joe Pfeiffer. I like him better than Nasruddin Imavov. I like it better than Brandon Allen, and I like it better than Pereira and Shara Magomedov. I love this guy, Brett. He's got fast hands. He's got KO power, and like I said, he can grapple. Cannonier is a very, very tough guy. Even at the age of 40, he's still one of the better middleweights in the world. Maybe a top 50 pound-for-pound guy still to this date. He's tough. He's a great striker, and he can strike with the best of them. But I think, Kyle Bohio is going on a title run. I think he's 1 or 2 fights away from challenging for the title, and I think it starts right here. I think he's going to go in there. I think he's going to be too skilled for Jared Cannonier, and I'm going to go Kyle Bohio by submission, Brett. But how do you see this one going?
I've been debating on this one because here's the thing. Cannonier is 40 years old. He just lost, by stoppage. And we hadn't seen Cannonier really look like that. That was the first sign, in my opinion, of him aging. Cannonier held up well in that fight he won with Derek Brunson, which earned him the title shot. But he was over 35 in that fight too. So now we're kind of seeing, maybe the decline of Jared Cannonier. But stylistically, this is the kind of matchup that might cause a guy like Kyle Barallo problems. Now, he does have knockout wins. Some of them have came as a result of TKO being on top on the ground. But I haven't seen the one-punch power. I haven't seen the technical ability in the stand-up that I've seen with him on the ground. On the ground, I've been completely impressed. But if Cannonier is able to stop a takedown, he does have big power. And I think that the type of guys like Cannonier or Du Plessis that are bigger and stronger and maybe harder to take off their feet, I think he might have a little bit of trouble with those guys. But we're going to see this weekend. I also am going to pick him by submission. I think that, Cannonier is just aging, and he's not going to be the same fighter we're accustomed to seeing him, over his career. So I think Carbaralo is on the way up. Like you were saying, he really has led the crop of the next wave of fighters here in the middleweight division coming forward. Like, none of these guys have ascended to this level as fast as Kai Barallo has. Now, if Joe Pyfer would have gotten that win over Jack Hermanson, maybe he's up here in this similar situation as well, instead of back where he is. But Barallo just keeps on winning, man. And when you get wins over Paul Craig, Muradov, Petrosian, these are legitimate contenders on the way up that you're knocking off. Petrosian is a world elite level kickboxer and has proven himself in his time with the UFC as well. So I think that Kai Barallo gets this one done by submission. I think over 5 rounds, it's going to be too long, and he'll find a home for a choke or some type of submission on the ground.
And Brett, I know it sounds like you're maybe a little bit more skeptical about his potential as I am. I'm definitely super high on him, and I'm really not have any questions. I have a super amount of faith in him. But Brett, you would say though, if he goes out there and impresses you, checks off some of those questions and boxes that you have for him and gets this win, you would agree, Brett, that if he gets a win, he's probably one more win away from fighting for the title, because if he beats Jared Cannonier, he's going to be right there just inside or just outside the top 5. And after being a guy like Jared Cannonier, after that, who else do you fight other than a guy up there in the division? Like I said, it could be Adesanya. If he wins this fight, he could challenge Adesanya. Maybe he fights the loser of Khamzat Chimaev and Whitaker. If Whitaker loses that fight, maybe him and Whitaker are fighting each other. But I do think Barallo goes out there, gets this win, and I think he challenges one of those top guys beginning of 2025. And I think if he goes out there and gets that win, I think those 2 wins can put him in a title match.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there with the second one you said. I was going to say the loser of Robert Whitaker and Khamzat Chimaev. Man, if Chimaev does get turned back, what a fight we've had between 2 of the best up-and-comers in that division, between him and Barallo. So, I really like that. And if Whitaker lost, you got a striker versus grappler matchup between a young guy and a former champion. So I think that, the sky is the limit for Kai Barallo if he can get past Jared Cannonier this weekend. He's going to have to get a big, strong, experienced man on the ground over 25 minutes and find a submission. He's going to have to look out for the power of Cannonier as well. I don't think he's as quick as he used to be, but he is still a very powerful and dangerous guy.
Yeah, I can't wait for this, Brett. And this definitely is going to be a true test to see how good Barallo can be in this division. But we have another matchup that stuck out to me, Brett. We got Neil Magny going up against another one of these young guys coming up in the division, Michael Morales. Another guy, Brett, that I'm honestly really high on as well. Neil Magny is a gatekeeper, for the top 10 welterweights in the division. Some guys can pass that test and some guys can't. If you could beat Neil Magny, you're a top 10 welterweight in the world. If you can't, you're probably, just outside, the top 15. But we've seen guys like Ian Gary and Shavkat pass that test. But we've seen most recently a guy like Mike Malott who didn't. But he was winning that fight, Brett. He was beating Neil Magny most of that fight. But Neil Magny showed that experience to dig deep and end up getting the win at the end. But in this one, Brett, I like Michael Morales. I think he's just as talented as Ian Gary. He's undefeated. He's a tremendous striker. He's only 25 years old. And like I said, Brett, I think he's just as talented and can be just as good, if not better, than Ian Gary. I know he's a little bit younger and he's got a little bit more, a couple fights to go before he gets to that level. But I like Michael Morales. I think he does pass the test against Neil Magny. And I'm going to go, Michael Morales by TKO. And I think he earns a top 10 welterweight in his next matchup. But how do you see this fight going, Brett?
Yeah, this is the old gatekeeper versus, the new kid on the block. I really like this fight a lot. I think that it has a lot of meaning for both of these guys' career. Like you said, Neil Magny just picked up a good win over Mike Malott in Canada. Malott was an up-and-comer. Now they throw him to an even better up-and-comer in Michael Morales. So he kind of got rewarded there with a top contender on his plate here. So one of the things when I was looking at this fight that really stuck out to me, Neil Magny, 6'3", very long reach for the division at 80 inches. We know this, but Michael Morales has a 79-inch reach at just 6 foot tall. So That's something that is not going to be a factor for Magny as it normally is. Normally, we see Neal, if he can't get the fight to the ground, he's able to use his length effectively to try and keep guys away from him. He's not going to be able to do that with Morales, in my opinion. Now, Morales, to me, is an athlete. He is one of these guys that if he grew up in America, he would be a safety in the NFL, a three-sport athlete in high school, baseball, basketball, football. He is a purebred athlete. You look at this guy, and he's got broad shoulders. His fast twitch muscle is just incredible. He's got great reaction time. He just looks more athletic and explosive than a lot of the guys he's fought so far. And I think that when he fights Neil Magny, we're going to see a similar thing to that. I don't think Neil is going to be able to get him to the ground. I think this kid's going to be too fast, too big, too strong for him. And on the feet, I think he's going to be, too fast for him, too explosive for him, and have too much power in his hands. We've seen Neil get chinned in the past by Ponzinibbio and others. So I think that Morales has a chance. Comes from Ecuador, and that's somewhere the UFC wants to build a base. They've got Chito Vera and some other Ecuadorian fighters as well. So I like Michael Morales in this one. He's going to be a huge favorite at ESPN Bet, -1,000, 10-1 favorite. I'm not betting that, Anthony. I'm not betting that.
Yeah, those are way too high of odds, Brett. But obviously, it sounds like we both agree on how this one's gonna go. But if Neil Magny could get another win against another up and comer and make that 2 in a row, maybe it is in his next fight he doesn't fight one of these guys on the up and coming. Maybe he fights a guy in the top 10 again if he could get another back-to-back win. But there's some other interesting fights on this fight card, Brett. We obviously got Shabazian going up against Gerard Meerschaert. Two guys, that are probably top 25, middleweights in the world. Shabazian, a young fighter who's trying to improve and make another run to the top 15. Meerschaert, a veteran of the game, another, tough guy who's a gatekeeper as well for the top 15. Striker versus grappler. So it's going to be interesting to see, Brett. But I do think Shabazian continues this run. I think he gets a win here by TKO. Meerschaert leaves himself open to hits, and we've seen that happen with Joe Pfeiffer, and we've seen it happen with, Khamzat Chimaev. So, I do think Shabazian goes out there, gets the win, and, maybe gets a top 15 guy in his next matchup. And then another thing that I'm excited to see, Brett, is Danny Silva in his second fight. He's on a 3-fight win streak. He does got KO power, and he is 9-1. But his last fight was a split decision. I'm curious to see if he can make some adjustments and maybe look even better, get another win, and maybe get another finish. But, what stands out to you, Brett, in this fight card?
Yeah, quickly on the Shabazian versus Meerschaert, I liked what you said, striker versus grappler. Meerschaert has 28 submission victories. Now, Shabazian has never been submitted, only one submission win on his record, but he is 10 years younger than Gerald Meerschaert in this one. If he keeps the fight standing, I think that he beats the brakes off Gerald. I think he puts volume on him and eventually gets him out of there, maybe in the second, third round. But if Gerald can get this fight to the ground, like I said, he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt with 28 submission victories. Edmund Shabazian is very long and has limbs that Gerald Meerschaert can take advantage of and expose on Kimuras and arm bars and certain things like that. So I think that if Gerald gets the fight to the ground, it becomes, widely more competitive. This one is -310 for Edmund Shabazian. I'm going to take him by decision. I think that Meerschaert will have times where he can get this to the ground, and he's going to try and maybe, hold him against the cage and get control time to earn a victory of his own. But I think that Shabazian is going to land the more damaging blows and win the fight based on damage. Meerschaert is tough. He can be chinned. I wouldn't be surprised if he got knocked out, but I'm going to say that he's going to stall enough to let this go to the judges' scorecards.
Okay, so it seems like we're both picking Shabazian, but you think it's going to go, the distance, and Meerschaert's going to be able to tough it out. It's going to be a decision win, but it seems like we both like the young Shabazian in this one. But yeah, Brett?
No, I just said, yeah, like I think that Shabazian could knock him out. And, as you were talking, I was thinking, he very well may. But I just think we got to give credit to how experienced, Gerald Meerschaert is, and know that Edmund Shabazian isn't necessarily the one-punch guy that Khamzat or Joe Pfeiffer was. He doesn't have that type of power. He's more of a volume and creative guy who goes for spinning techniques, leg kicks, head kicks, that sort of thing. So, I really like Shabazian, but I think that it's probably a decision victory for him.
Yeah, that's a good point, Brett. Yeah, he definitely doesn't have the same knockout power as those guys. Joe Pfeiffer may be the hardest hitting guy on planet Earth, and
Yeah.
Hamzat is definitely a hard hitting guy as well.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a discrepancy there. But we have some stuff, outside the UFC in the PFL world. We had, the PFL 8, the 2024 playoffs. We had, Kasanganay getting a win over Josh Sylvia, just like we predicted by unanimous decision. We had Yagshar Murderdoff over Rob Wilkerson by unanimous decision. You called that, Brett. I picked Wilkerson, but you definitely all over that one. We had Godzid over Delfort by TKO, and we had Brett Primus, as we predicted, over Clay Coward by unanimous decision. I was definitely really impressed by Primus. He dominated that with grappling. So I was definitely impressed with him, Brett. And we definitely get some interesting matchups in the championship rounds. What was your reaction to this?
Yeah, I thought this was great, man. Like Rob Wilkerson, starting off real quick. I'll start off with the middleweights. So Kasanganay takes care of business against Silveira. We saw that last year. I'm happy that wasn't the final again, and they matched those two guys up. But Dovlet Yagshimuradov, I've been watching in Bellator. I was saying he's just such a tough customer. He like DDP is just extremely durable. He is somebody who, looking at his body and stature, you would not think would throw these spinning techniques like we saw him throw. And even he didn't necessarily rock Rob Wilkerson. Wilkerson had a hand up and caught it, but it caught him clean in the hand, and it was a good spinning kick, and I think won him the round. But Dovlet can get it done on the ground. He can get it done on the feet. He's very tough. He's a good athlete. But I like Dovlet versus Kasanganay. I think that's a really good fight. I don't think Kasanganay is going to, take it to the ground. And I think that Dovlet might be a more powerful striker than him on the feet. So it's going to be a very interesting fight. I think Kasanganay is going to be a wide favorite, just like Wilkerson was, because people don't really know Yagshimuradov. So, I mean, maybe they'll know him in short order if he takes out Wilkerson and Kasanganay back-to-back. So, he's my pick to win the middleweight tournament. I liked him against Wilkerson. The light heavyweight tournament. And I liked him against Wilkerson. And, I like him against Kasanganay as well. So the light heavyweights got their championship matchup set between Kasanganay and Yagshimuradov. Then we've got Gadzi Rabadanov versus Brett Primus. Like you were saying, I was impressed with Primus taking on a good striker in Clay Collard. And Gadzi Rabadanov is my pick to win the lightweight tournament. He is just so well-rounded. I saw him fight Koji Takada over there in Ryzen about 2 years ago. That was the first time I really saw Gadzi Rabadanov, and I'm like, man, who is this kid? He trains with Khabib and these guys at AT&T, so he's training with he's training at one of the best camps in the world over there in California. So I really like Gadzi Rabadanov to win the lightweight tournament. I thought he looked impressive over Michael Dufort. And Brent Primus looked great against Clay Collard. I think that's a hell of a matchup between a veteran guy and a former Bellator champion in Brent Primus versus a guy who's very hungry with a point to prove in Gadzi Rabadanov.
Yeah, those matchups are going to be super, super tough to pick. Right now, I'd probably lean towards Brett Primus and Kasanganay. But Yagshimuradov is definitely somebody that I really can't, keep picking against. He's definitely going to be some guy that is definitely going to put himself on the map, Brett. And I know you're the PFL expert and the PFL guy, and I definitely take your word for it. And I wouldn't be surprised if the fights do go that way.
Yeah, I just think that some of these people, have been around the PFL for so long and made a name, like Clay Collard and some of these guys that haven't really been tested on that wide scene to where they fought in the elite competition in other organizations. So Rob Wilkerson's great, yeah, and his record's 19-2, but I've seen Dovlet go and fight really tough guys himself, and I know how durable he is and stuff. I just think some of these guys that come from Europe and Russia that people don't really know kind of go under the odds makers view until it's too late and they've already gone and beaten some of these guys. So I really like Rabadanov and I really like Yagshimuradov going forward.
Yeah, I can't wait, Brennan. We also got some PFL this weekend. We got PFL 9 2024 playoffs. We got the featherweight and the welterweights fighting. We got Brendan Longname going up against Kai Kamerka. And then we got Gabriel Bragda going up against Timur Kamedov. And then we got, Magomed going up against Neiman Grassi. and we got Shamil Maziv going against Murdad Razivadov. These are going to be some tough matchups, Brett. And definitely going to be interesting to see who wins. Who do you got in these matchups?
I mean, my favorite fight on this one is Magomed Umatov versus Neiman Gracie. Undefeated, 16-0 for Umatov. He's trying to get his first $1 million check for winning this tournament. He was forced out of the playoffs last year. So he's facing Neiman Gracie, who has the legendary name behind him. You always want to get a win over somebody in the Gracie family. And if the fight goes to the ground, it's very interesting. So Magomed Umatov is a Sambo champion. If he takes Neiman to the ground, that's Neiman's best chance to win. So it's kind of an interesting stylistic thing. We're going to get two grapplers of different varieties going against one another here. So I'm really interested to see that one. And then in the main event, Brendan Loughnane versus Kai Kamaka. Loughnane, I believe, has now 20 knockout wins on his record. If it's not 20, it's 19. He is somebody at featherweight that can stop fights at an alarming clip. So I think that him moving forward would not be, a surprise. But Kai Kamaka is a veteran of the UFC and Bellator. He's fought in guys like Henry Corrales and gone to war with them in very close contests. He's battle tested. I really like Kai Kamaka as well. I think it's going to be a close fight. And I think it's going to be the first fight for Brendan Loughnane that goes to decision this season. Now, moving down the card, Gabriel Braga versus Timur Khizriev. That's one that fight fans are going to want to watch. That's 14-1 for Braga versus 16-0 for Timur Khizriev. Timur Khizriev, I've seen fight in person 4 times, 3 times in the city of Chicago. He is tremendous. This guy's grappling is world-class. He's the guy that we saw on Instagram go, and Justin Gonzalez had his foot like this, and he did a somersault and then reversed and took him down. He's incredible. If you haven't seen Timur Khizriev fight, go ahead and watch him this weekend, because I believe he's going to be in the World Championships and then be the world champion as well. Set 16-0, maybe soon to be 17-0, but he's facing Gabriel Braga, who has an amazing story behind him, losing a family member, his father. He's fighting with a heavy heart. He has heavy hands as well and can knock you out. So Khizriev's going to have to get this one to the ground, or he's going to have some trouble here as well. Now, Musayev and Ramazanov. Musayev already knocked out Ramazanov in the regular season, gave him the first loss on his record. I think Musayev goes and wins this welterweight tournament, or him versus Umatov in the main event or in the championship final would be, an absolute tremendous fight between 2 undefeated guys. So I really like that as well. I think that Musayev knocks Ramazanov out again. Murad doesn't really have the striking that Shamil does. Shamil knocked out Logan Storley. I was thinking 4-time All-American wrestler from Minnesota, Logan Storley. Knocked out Logan Storley and then knocked out Ramazanov back-to-back. This guy's got heavy hands and is a wrestler as well. So I like Musayev in that one, and I think there's some good fights on the card.
Yeah, Brett. So, just to recap, I'm going to go Loughnane and Kurvizov, and I'm going to go Magomed and Shamil. And then who are you going with, Brett, to recap?
Yeah, I'm going to go Brendan Loughnane decision. I'm going to go Magomed Umatov by knockout. I'm going to go Timur Khizriev by decision, and I'm going to go Shamil Musayev by knockout.
Okay, so it seems like we're pretty much on an agreement, Brett, but there's definitely maybe some upsets that could happen, and yep. I can't wait for this, Brett, and we definitely got some interesting fights this weekend. But that's all we have for you fight fans. Definitely make sure to tune in. We'll recap all this next week, but definitely make sure to follow Puncher's Chance Podcast on all social medias at Punch ETB. Make sure to follow the Empty the Bench Podcast Network on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at ETB Network. Make sure also to follow our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ETB Network for all of our shows and all of our other ETB Network news and shows. If you can't watch Puncher's Chance, then take us on the road and listen to us wherever you can. That's all we have, fight fans. I'm Anthony Balester. That's Brett Cagle. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for joining us.